and welcome to my channel. This is Shanna with Caffeinated Craftiness, and I'm here today with a new video, one of my first videos for this channel, featuring products today with Trinity Stamp Company. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm making a Slimline card today using the Stitched Card Panels and Windows die set for the Simple Stitched Border, the Scenic Border die set. I will also be using the new released Rainbow Builder die set, the Mr. Snailman stamp set, and I thought I was going to use the Lots of Dots stencil, but I ended up not using it. So I'm actually going to make a Slimline card today, but first I'm actually going to show you how I did my rainbow. It's not my first time using this die. I've used it in a previous project before this video. So I had actually cut it out of all sorts of different colors of cardstock already. So you see all the scraps that I keep in my pouch. Today I'm actually going to use one of the cloud pieces that come with it as a stencil to make my background. So we're going to be making a Slimline card, starting with a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock that's 4 by 9 in size, so I can cut it down later with a die. I'm going to use an ink blending tool and then the Ink on 3 Peacock blue ink. This is a soldering mat on Amazon I use as a water media mat. I'm going to tap off some of that ink and then just start stenciling on the clouds. Doesn't have to be too perfect because we are going to cover up a good chunk of the sky with the rainbow. Just going to move and rotate the stencil a little bit as I go, and using just a circular motion with the ink blending tool to apply the ink. So I just continue to reposition the stencil until the whole sky is covered. I'm actually going to speed this up a little bit so you guys don't have to sit and watch the whole thing in slow motion. Next, I'm actually going to grab the die for the rainbow and position it to see if I have enough clouds so I can see the spaces I still need to add. So I'll just bring the stencil back on, fill in those couple spaces, and then my sky's done. I do like to blend out, oops, see look, my paper moved, minor mishap. As I was saying, I do like to move the stencil around quite a bit to get some different angles, but I also tend to blend out quite a bit of the blue. I don't like a lot of stark white on my card most of the time because I think the blue helps make it a brighter sky. So you're going to see me go over the card just with the dauber with a light coating of ink to get rid of a lot of the white. Now that the clouds are all done, I'm going to take my water bottle and I'm going to just lightly spritz it and then take a microfiber cloth and dry it off and absorb that water off to leave those water spots to add some texture and interest to the background. I'll move the card base off and then go ahead and clean my mat really quick because we're going to be using it again a little later. At this point you could choose to heat set to finish drying the card before you move on, but I'm actually just going to keep on chugging along. This is a template for my rainbow. It was simply made by die cutting the rainbow once and I saved that negative piece. It's going to help me line up the rainbow without much fudging around with it. I'm taping it down to my mat and a little bit to the card so it doesn't slide around, and then bringing in all my colors. The process for this is pretty much the same. I'm fighting with my glue for a second, so bear with me. I will add that my adhesive of choice when working with this rainbow die is a liquid adhesive. It allows a little bit more movement and it's a little more forgiving when you set something down. For instance, when I apply this purple piece, I am playing with it, trying to get it to work, and realize it's the wrong size. That is the next size down. So I need to start with my pink piece, and it just lines up right across the edge of that. Moving on to the purple, it fits now because it's in the right spot. Coming down to blue, we did basic rainbow order. I did a little bit of messing around with it just with the pieces I had, but it's pretty close. You can also take the liquid adhesive and put it straight to the paper like now instead of doing it onto the die cut, but I found for me that adding it to the die cut was a lot easier for me to manipulate. Finishing off the rainbow, we have, I believe, one more piece, and it's going to end with red. I do like the angle this rainbow cuts at. It makes it look like it has a little bit of dimension already just laying flat on the paper. Now that that's done, we're going to move on to our ground. I use the Scenic Borders die set, and I use the grass and the hill shape, and I'm just going to cut this in half to create my two. I die cut them at the same time, is why they were all on one paper. We're going to use the ink blending tool and then the Ink on 3 Goddess Green ink to color these. I'll go ahead and bring that soldering mat in for my media mat so I can ink on these and have something easy to clean up. Sorry about the funky camera angles here, guys. I didn't mean to keep it off camera as much as I did. I zoom out a little bit, that should help. All I do is I'm just using a circular motion and using that ink blending tool and just adding on that green. The idea is when I put these on the card anyways, they're going to be layered, so I don't need to go all the way to the bottom because that's going to be hidden behind the grass layer, and some of it's going to get trimmed off when I die cut the card. As the saying goes, you guys have probably seen this technique a million times, so I am going to go ahead and skip ahead to where the ink blending is all done on the grass. And we're back. Off camera, I did lightly spritz those grass and hill pieces with some water to add some texture, just like we did to the background with the clouds. And now I'm just layering them onto that background to see where exactly I want to place them. After I figure that out, I take them off and I'm going to add some glue to the back side so I can adhere them. I also use liquid glue for this for the same reasons. I just find it slightly more forgiving for when I want to put it in the exact spot. Sorry, I am off camera a little bit. I'm still learning these whole camera angles things, so bear with me. I do apologize. After the hill piece is done, I'm just going to add that grass. I am keeping these flat instead of using foam tape because I do want this to be a little more male friendly. It is going to a friend for her birthday. Here I'm bringing in that stitched card die. I realized my grass was just slightly too low to actually really be on the cards, so I brought it up a little bit, also why that wet glue is helpful. And then I'm just going to tape this die in place and run it through my big shot. After a couple passes through the big shot, it did manage to not cut all the way through because essentially it was cutting through 4 layers of cardstock. But it did give me a really good impression and cut through a couple of the layers, so I'm just coming in with regular scissors and I will trim that just with the scissors straight across that line. An alternative fix to this would have been to cut my panel down first before adhering all the pieces, but I really wanted that stitched impression to go across all of the layers, including my grass, and tie all in as one piece and frame it, so that is why I chose to do it this way. After all of those edges were trimmed off, that finished the background panel. That's the scene for my card. The rainbow makes me super happy and all those bright colors are totally my vibe. Gonna move that off to the side and bring in the stuff I need to stamp. I thought I was gonna use a full piece, found a scrap at the last minute, and this is the Mr. Snailman stamp set from Trinity Stamps. So gonna go ahead and lay down those stamps. I love this snail. He just makes me happy delivering his mail. And of course the snail man needs his mailbox. Quickly flip my lid over so it's set to the clear stamp side instead of the rubber, and realize my magnet is in my way. Memento was my choice of ink for this because I will be using Copics to color them. I do like to stamp them a couple times so I get a nice dark black crisp image. After I get the impressions I want, I go ahead and take it off my stamp positioner and clean up my workspace so I can start coloring. I am pretty new to Copic coloring with a pretty small collection, but I'm going to use what I have today. I'm going to start with R27 and R08 and go ahead and start coloring that present. Like I said, totally new, so my methods aren't always perfect, but I do generally like what I get. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see the coloring a little better. And I did speed this up so it's not painstakingly slow. I had started with just a base coat of the R08 and now I'm coming in with that R27 just to give me a little hint of a shadow. There isn't a true contrast between these two, but it did give me some if you look kind of close. After adding that shadow, I'm going to come back in with that R08 and just blend out those lines a little bit to give me a smooth transition. Next up, we're actually coloring the snail shell. I started with E15 and E35. I used the darker shade first to add my shadows, and then realized pretty quickly when I added my mid-tone that I pretty much had the same colors going. My blend wasn't going to work at all. So I did add in E37 to darken out those shadows, and it worked a lot better. I actually have some dimension on it, and then when I went to blend it out, it worked really well. So finished adding those shadows again, and then came back in with that mid-tone E15 to blend it all out. I chose some warm grays to color the snails, so W1 and W3, I did my shadows again on him first with this, so the W3, and then I came in and blended it all out with that W1 marker. I didn't find I needed 2 coats with this. He actually pretty much blended out with the first pass. I chose just a regular blue in B28 and didn't do any 2 blendings in that tiny little hat. The colorless blender in C1 is what I used to do my letters, so pretty much wanted them white but needed to add a little bit of shadow so they looked white on the paper. The colorless blender helped smooth out that shadow a little bit. To color the little hearts, I used RV23 and chose a single color and no shading on those as well. Moved on to the mailbox next. Using the same pink and the same red I used for the snail man, I used the R27 and the RV23 to color that pink and red in the heart. I chose some warm grays for the mailbox in W3, W5, and W7, starting with my lightest shade this time first. See, I can't pick one way, guys. I go both ways, dark to light, light to dark, doesn't matter. But this time I went light to dark and then worked in my shadows. So that's what you see me doing here is the mid-tone shadows. I will go all the way through with my mid-tone and then come back in with the darkest and then work in reverse to go all the way back to my lightest. That way I find that all those colors blend out a little better for me and I have a smooth transition between them. When picking the colors for the mailbox, I pretty much tried to think of mailboxes I've had in my life, and I'm pretty positive all of them have been either like stainless steel gray or black. So we went with gray. I did color that little flag with VO5, and then I believe I used some cool tone markers and the colorless blender again to do the, I guess, address part. I'm not quite sure what we'd call that, but we're going to say it's part of the mailbox, so I was stuck with the same colors. There is a coordinating die set for these stamps. At the time of filming, I didn't have it, so I off-screen fussy cut all of these and saved you guys the torture of watching me cut them all out. So we skipped ahead, and now I'm placing them on my card. I forgot to zoom my camera back out. I apologize. I believe I remember here in a second. But I'm taking some foam tape, and I'm really just placing them right onto the card. I thought I was going to pop up that mailbox. There we go, zoomed back out. I thought I was going to pop up that mailbox with foam tape. You'll see me grab it here next. And then I realized I didn't have the time nor the patience to cut my foam super skinny to fit that post. So I peeled it off really quick and went to a wet adhesive and glued it flat onto my card. Next, I peeled off the backing paper to the foam tape for the snail and put him right at the base of my window. I die cut the word happy from the Happy Sentimenty die from Trinity Stamps. Cut it out once for the shadow in white, and then I cut 3 in black of the word and glued them all together for a little bit of dimension. After they were all glued together, I glued the word to the shadow and then put it right on top of my rainbow. Next, I grabbed a scratch piece of white cardstock and a stamp block, and I grabbed the Happy Birthday sentiment from a Sentiment for Almost Everything stamp set and just stamped it and cut it into a rectangle. I do generally like to cut these little strips myself instead of search for a die because 1, I probably don't have a die that fits, and 2, it is a lot more time efficient for me. I matted it on a scrap piece of black cardstock and did the same thing, trimming around the sides, and then I was ready to add the sentiments to my card. I fiddled around a little bit with the placement, as you can see, and ultimately decided on dead center with a little bit of overlap with the Y. I did use a little bit of foam tape to pop it up, and then the card panel was done. All that's left to do now is mat it onto a card base. My card bases start out as a 7 by 8.5 inch piece of cardstock that I score at 3.5. At this point, you can use any adhesive of choice. I chose to use some foam tape to add a little bit of dimension to the front of the card. Most of my card is fairly flat with just a little bit of foam, but I wanted this to pop up a little more. I did make sure to put some in the middle so it supported the card in the mail. Peeled off all of the backing strips, which we all know can be a little more cumbersome than need be. And then you will see me add it to the card. Adding foam taped backgrounds for me is always a little bit tricky, and as you can see, I messed up on my first try, so I'm going to peel it off, and then I'm going to go at it from the portrait side. I find it easier to line up. I'm still off a little bit, but this is a little bit I can live with. That actually finishes up my card for today. Thank you guys so much for watching my basically first YouTube video. I learned a lot along the way with a lot more to go. If you did like what you saw today, please feel free to like and subscribe. I totally appreciate your time. Have a great day and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.